Ladies and gentlemen, this is Julien Masson from Adrenaline Combatives, and I'm here with Mary Stevens from Athena School of Karate.
Correct. Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, it's good to talk to you. It's taken us a while to set this up. So, yeah.
No, it was planned for quite a while. You're a very busy lady.
Yeah, that's true. But here we are. It's Friday afternoon. I've got a nice cup of coffee and we good to chat. It'd be great.
Nice, nice. So I tell you what, Mary, if you give us like a little introduction about who you are, what you do, and then we'll get into the heart of the questions.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I run a karate school in Oxfordshire.
Mhm.
I teach self-protection and violence prevention in different ways. I have a good collaboration, Violence Prevention and Management UK, with my friend Christopher down the road.
Nice.
And I'm also working on a children's self-protection program with Jamie Clubb, which is Animal Instincts. So as we talked about, like one of my main focuses is like self-protection and personal security for vulnerable people, for those who don't obviously look like they've done 15 years of martial arts training.
Mm.
People who are and would run screaming if you wanted them to do 15 years of martial arts training.
Those that need it, when
Yeah.
you think about it, and this is why this is why I'm starting to get more and more attracted to violence prevention,
Mm.
because now we're talking about people that really need it, people that really need that stuff. And that's what I remember I had a conversation with Rich some time ago, and he was saying, I was saying to myself, look at all these guys that train with me, like
Mm.
most, like Krav Maga people, combatives people, people that done boxing or Thai boxing or MMA, which are my kind of people,
Yeah.
people I'm around with, people I train with. These guys don't really need that shit. These guys train because they love it. Same like me. I mean, don't get me wrong. I started, and that's why I got a degree of empathy within me. Because first of all, I'm that type of person. I'm an empathetic person. But when I started out of a necessity and out of love. So there was both elements for me. There was the fact that I loved it, and the fact that I needed this. So
Mm.
now when I understand people that are scared, people that are traumatized, people that are afraid, that don't think that they can fight, how do we teach those people? How do we help those people? So that's really going to be the topic today.
Definitely.
How do we help those people?
So for coming back to what you were saying there, yeah, I remember when I first met you, was a seminar that Tommy Joe was putting on.
I remember.
And I just remember my overpower. I look at you and I think, this is nobody in their right mind would be attacking this guy, right? Like your threat profile is completely different to like my threat profile. Or so I'm gonna tell you a story about I work for a project manager for an NGO in India, and teaching self-protection and karate to vulnerable girls. And so one of the girls that we work with is a victim of acid attack.
Mm.
And she was harassed on her way to school. She and her twin sister would walk to school every day, and this guy would harass them. And they were very uncomfortable with it. They didn't really have any tools in their toolbox to deal with that situation. Her dad was dead. So normally in that kind of Indian village society, it would be like, get your dad to warn him off. But she didn't have a dad. And this kind of escalated onto the point where she then decided that she would speak to one of her uncles about it.
Mm.
So she got her uncle to talk to the boy, who was furious that somebody like outside of the family, and that he felt shamed by this. One May evening, so May is a super hot time in Uttar Pradesh. It's like 40 degrees. Nobody can sleep inside the house. So the very, very poor village. So what they would do is they sleep outside on the ground. In the night he came and he threw acid on her face while she was asleep. He didn't really care whether it was her or her sister who got the acid. It was her, and some of it went on her mum as well. And then of course we're in rural India. It was 12 hours before she had any kind of medical treatment. Her face is just like destroyed. She's the same age as my daughter, and when I first met her, she was working in a cafe like my daughter was. So there was a lot of kind of emotion in that for me as well. Two people in different scenarios. But if you're asking me what self-defense education can you give an 18-year-old girl who has acid thrown in her face when she's asleep, then you know that we have to wind that back to, it's always about the timeline. One of the things that I saw, all of my Indian girls are often really scared about incidents and what if this and what if that and what if that. And I'm always like, well, what happened before? What happened before? What happened before? How far back down that timeline do you go before you can find something that they could control, where they managed to like make a decision that would make them safer? Because it's sure as hell not when they're fast asleep having, you know, acid poured in their face. That's, you know, that nobody can defend from that position.
Yeah.
So, and that really sparked a lot of research for me into the area of violence awareness, prevention, relationships, boundary setting, understanding how to become a harder target. And all of these things then are more useful to the, you know, to a girl who is very small, has no training, is terrified. Those skills are more useful than, you know, throat punches. Although, in respect to Tommy Joe Moore, throat punches are also very cool. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. So we're talking about, pardon me. We're talking about the pre-fight confrontation and all the precautions that could be taken, that should be taken, in order to develop some good and safe personal security habits and get rid of the bad habits, and kind of instead of, you know, having the bad habits, kind of installing good personal security habits, which will kind of reduce the possibility of an attack or the possibility of an assault or things like that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Imagine yourself as a victim pool. So like one of the girls that we work with on our schools workshop, she's like maybe 15 years old. And one of the things that she disclosed when we were doing group work stuff was that she works as a waitress in a cafe, and the boss had been touching her inappropriately. And this had been going on for 9 months. And she felt like it was her fault because it had been going on for so long, and she felt that that was in some way meant that she was okay with it, and she wasn't okay with it. She was like really uncomfortable every time the boss was in the kitchen or near the till or anything like that, and she's physically terrified. But when you look at that, that's a power dynamic thing. She's an employee. She doesn't feel confident to call him out. And that's when we look at how we teach boundary setting, and we get that early prevention, that detection of a creep. Because for a lot of the time for women, is dealing with creeps is a thing. Not every one of those creeps is going to turn into an abducting rapist. Some of them will. But if you make yourself an unappealing target at a very early stage, then that is job done.
Yeah.
So that's really where we sit, is more in terms of like educating people in that hard target kind of environment, and then also learning how to deal. Of course, we also deal with worst case scenario.
Yeah.
So we go through the whole spectrum. It's just that where most people focus on that little bit, we focus on what happened before, what happened before, what happened before, like way down the line.
Yeah. So this is really kind of when you said it yourself. A lot of people that claim to teach self-defense, and you know, there's a lot of martial arts school out there that claim to teach self-defense when what they're teaching is martial arts. Then there is there is a lot of actual self-defense teachers that are, I mean, you know, they're closer to self-defense than they are to martial arts, that claim to teach self-defense. But most of the time, the only thing they're going to focus on is the in-fight confrontation phase and dynamic of that. They're not going to speak about pre-fight confrontation. They're not going to speak about post-fight confrontation. They're not going to speak about awareness, pre-threat cue recognition, behavioral awareness, like criminology, criminal psychology, criminal behavior, criminal archetype, criminal motivation. And then in return, they're also not going to speak about the aftermath of violence, be it short-term, you know, aftermath, how to speak to a police officer without incriminating yourself, how to speak to a judge in a court of law, how to self-medical triage to make sure you're not bleeding, how to manage yourself, how to manage your heart rate and lower your heart rate via certain types of breath work so that you can regain cognitive functions and motor functions. You can start talking properly to a police officer, for example, without looking like you're the bad guy. And also, of course, the long-term implication of violence, which could be psychological, mental, emotional, physical, even sexual traumas that takes years and years and years to get over, that needs psychotherapy. And so a lot of people don't include these very, very crucial things that should be spoken about. If you claim to teach self-defense, you should be speaking about those things, and at least speaking of them, if not like going in depth into each subject, which is something I try to do more and more now. But is that what you would call violence prevention? So there is obviously prevention means what you do before the actual event. So left of bank, have you read the book Left of Bank?
Read Left of Bank, yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think so. Violence prevention definitely falls in that, but it also, to flip that on its head, like Randy King does, you want to make sure say, well, actually, what we're talking about is we're living a more empowered life. We're living a freer life. We're empowered to make good decisions about where we go and how we do that. So that, in fact, you shouldn't be. It doesn't make you hypervigilant. So violence prevention education should make you feel like happier and safer, as opposed to like just being aware of the multiple risks that there are. And I think one of the disadvantages of this kind of self-defense education that you're talking about, where people go and they hit pads and they leave feeling like, oh wow, I could deal with anything, and they're learning techniques as opposed to principles. They're learning emergency, like first aid skills instead of good habits, safe habits for life. And it's a false sense of security, which is immoral, I think.
It is, and that's what one thing. Like I don't tend to use the word self-defense, and for a reason I'll explain to you why. The word defending means that you are reacting. It's a reactive physical dynamic. You're reacting to some sort of stimuli, something that's already being done to you, which means that, well, if you're getting stabbed, then you already caught the first one. You already had the first one or the second one, and now you're trying to reverse the predatory prey role. In my book, that's the art of dying. That's the art of losing slowly, like self-defense. So defense also means that there was no pre-fight intel, no observation in place, no awareness. Do you know what I mean? So that's why I like to use the word self-protection, because it encompasses more elements to it. It encompasses, understanding how to gain these observational skills. Be it like, but I generally divide awareness in 4 different parts. The first one would be personal awareness, so knowledge of self, knowing who you are, what you're capable of, how your adrenaline feels like, how to override it, how to manage your heart rate, how to breathe, how to do all that things. Also, what you're capable of, how far you're ready to go, and what you're ready to do in order to stay alive. These things really matter. And then you'd have the environmental awareness, which relates to the environment, being able to draw an accurate mental map of your immediate surrounding, cover, concealment, any weapons of potential weapon of opportunity, anything that you could use, escape routes, so entry, exit, secondary exit, all that stuff. Then you'd have situational awareness, which of course that's the most spoken about, that relates to the situation. How many people, how many men, how many women, who is doing what, who is saying what, who looks, mean, who looks like he can have it, how he's dressed, how people are dressed, facial expression, cauliflower ears, flat nose, big face, big jaw, big neck. This stuff that you will see. Who's got the domina? Who's more alpha? Do you know what I mean? That would be environmental. And then, of course, something that you're much more familiar with, and Richard, of course, Rich and Pam and Chris, which is behavioral awareness, and kind of behavioral awareness that works both ways. Either inward, you learn to become aware of your own thoughts and emotions and behavior, so that you can control your heart rate, control yourself, control your emotions, your stress, your fear, your fatigue, your adrenaline, all that stuff. So that's emotional state management. And then you got a behavioral awareness, obviously, on the outside. Now you're becoming aware of who is around you. And that's why I said to people, if you are taking your family to the restaurant, and you chose, if you're smart, you went online, You know, let's say it's a restaurant in another country. Let's say you're visiting Turkey with your family, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna take my family. I'm gonna treat my family to a nice meal. So if I'm smart, I'm gonna go online. I'm gonna check the neighborhood. We're gonna check the threat level of, not something you learn in close protection. I'm gonna check the threat level. I'm gonna see if the place is a nice place with a good reputation or not, and I'm gonna do my homework before I bring my family into a place. So that's the first thing, and then that relates to environmental awareness. By the way, it's pre-environmental awareness, and then as I get inside the place, I'll be right. If I see a guy, let's say for example, if I see a woman crying her eyes off with her makeup drifting down her eyes, with a guy in front of her who's probably pointing a finger and saying some nasty stuff to her, I'm aware of his behavior. So that's part of behavioral awareness. I'm aware that the guy he's hurting her. He can see that he's hurting her, and he doesn't give a fuck. He's a narc. He's a narcissist, or he's a sociopath. That I already had this first by observing. I know what sort of person he is. Now, one person could be okay, but now let's say I look to my left and I see another guy that's alarming. That's behavior is alarming to me, and then another one. Is that really a place where I want my family to go to? Maybe not. Maybe it's time for me to go, right, kids, right, we're going to go to another place. And that would be violence prevention. That would be violence prevention at its best. See it first and avoid or escape or remove yourself from the situation. So what do you think about all this? Would that be violence prevention?
Yeah, definitely. That kind of scenario is something that we do regularly. I was working with a group of nursery staff on Tuesday up in Stratford, and we were talking about like their inbuilt skills, like understanding the skills that this is part of what we do with 500 Rising a lot of the time, is helping women understand their own kind of biological predisposition to awareness and interpretation of a broader kind of stream of information at any one time. And so we did a little risk assessment on, you walk into a cafe, what would you, where are you going to sit, who are you seeing, and how are you like making those decisions? Everything is an ongoing risk assessment, right? Same as you're talking about with that restaurant. You go, this restaurant looks like too much trouble. In the same way, we're kind of there's that risk reward thing all the time. And, so we had some good conversations around if there were people in there that they instinctively didn't want to sit close to or felt might be trouble. This is like the quality of the cake in the establishment, and whether or not like good enough cake would have them, like, you know, obviously we're joking at that same time, but having that kind of comprehension of everything they're doing, they have to weigh it up. And it's the same, like, again, dealing with people, a girl going on a night out, she should be allowed to wear what she wants, right? If she wants to wear hot pants and high heels, then all good, all power to her. But she obviously needs to understand that there are consequences for her, like she might get cold, she's not going to be able to run very fast, all of these different things. For every time you're making a decision that is about your personal freedom, you also then need to make mitigations that go in and around that. Like, so for when we're talking about with our teens about going to prom and that kind of thing, well, like, okay, are we traveling in a group? Are we going to take a spare pair of shoes with us? Are we, you know, what's your warm coat situation for the way home? Are you going to save up and get a taxi together because that's going to be safer? You know, all of these different things is like, well, okay, here are your risks. Let's be very aware of our risks. And then how are we mitigating? I did a risk assessment for some friends going on a Pride March a couple of years back. And the same kind of thing, like to be like very, like, this is very much my identity, they're saying, and they're like, this is who I am. It's very important that I'm visibly like participating in this. But at the same time, we also know that there are risks like that go alongside of that, because there are people out there that will like inflict violence on somebody because of their life choices. So in that same way, you're looking at everybody's individual threat profile, and you know, for that context and that, you know, where they are, time of day, all of this kind of stuff, and we're going, okay, so this is you being aware, this is you deciding where your personal lines are, how you're prepared. You know, so I know I absolutely will wear these heels because I love these heels. I'm not a heels person because, like, I seriously getting anywhere. I don't know if you've tried it yourself, my friend. I would recommend.
No, I have not. but I know I can clearly imagine that it's impossible to run in those.
They're not great for self-defense.
Yeah, unless you use them, you grab them and you start putting them in people's eye, maybe.
It's an incidental weapon, but you'd still be quite unstable with that. And to be honest, the heels break way too easily. So again, I don't think I would recommend unless as a last resort. But anything can be used as a weapon if
Of
you're
course,
using it in
of
the right
course.
way. So what I'm saying there is that we try to make sure that people have a strong degree of personal freedom, but that they have the ability to make informed decisions about their life. So
Yeah.
people can live like with knowledge and with freedom, but hopefully with safety, because we all want to come home safe at the end of the day. Although that brings us to domestic violence, where there is no safety at the end of the day,
Yeah.
which for most women, obviously the biggest danger to them is not the stranger out there, in the taxi. It's going to be their partner or their colleague or somebody in their family. And predominantly, those are the risks that they're looking at, and nobody's dealing with that on, in the way that it should. Well, a few people are dealing with that, but it's like they would much rather have you strike pads and pretend that it's going to be a stranger in an alleyway than face the reality that you're talking about maybe trying to hurt somebody that you love, that you care about, that you're trying to save, that, at the end of the day, you're going to be going to bed with that person. And you need to find a way of living in a situation where you don't feel safe. And
Yeah.
that's a terrible situation to be in. And so many women are in that situation, and men too, to be fair. That's not exclusive to women. And the rates of men who are living in coercively controlled relationships is very underreported, because men don't feel comfortable in talking about that. And
Yeah.
that's where you also think that we're talking about physical threat a lot of the time. And sometimes men are not necessarily physically
It's emotional bullying most of the time.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. A verbal abuse, emotional,
Blackmail, emotional blackmail, and stuff like yeah.
and it's very traumatic, and it can be very damaging. So and that is, it's very underreported. So that's an area as well where people need to learn to prioritize themselves and set early boundaries in relationships, and identifying red flags, like in Becca's gift of fear, where you're looking at here are the pins. Those things really do apply
Yeah.
in relationships. And I find that if people have really good information about early identification of red flags, it's difficult to set boundaries, but
Yeah.
it only gets harder. So like if you're in the tea room at work, and there's that guy that always stands too close, or always makes it awkward, or always makes jokes that you feel really uncomfortable about, you don't feel confident enough to call it out, then that's a difficult situation. But that then can escalate, and teaching people how to manage those difficult conversations can be a really effective way of helping them manage all of those slightly problematic relationships that are mostly, that's maybe as far as it's going to go,
Yeah.
slightly problematic. It's not necessarily going to go, full blown crazy.
I'm just thinking. Do you know something you said about like inappropriate jokes?
Yeah,
That's really a masculine thing, you know. Because do you know what? I'll be honest with you. I got that superpower of looking within. Yeah.
yeah,
And so the first time that Richard spoke to me about narcissism and sent me the narcissistic personality traits,
yeah.
which are quite a few, I looked at them and I realized that I had a few of them. Do you know what I mean? And when I spoke to him, I said, "Rich, I think I got a few. I think I got a few traits of narcissism, man." He said, "That's normal. We all do, as long as you got a few, because we're only humans. But if you have like if you have like 5 or more, then like that's when you really fall into the personality disorder." And so what you just said about inappropriate jokes, I mean, shit, I'm the king of inappropriate jokes. So, I mean, I get it. Some people might not, might feel. I get that. Some people might feel uncomfortable with those jokes, but yeah, I realize that's something I do every now and then.
And the thing is, that can be context dependent, because sometimes inappropriate jokes are just inappropriate jokes. You know, I have some very inappropriate friends who say like stuff that I'm just like, I do not believe that just came out of your mouth.
I'm like that.
Yeah, but it's about what is the intent, because sometimes like a creepy guy will be using inappropriate humor as a boundary test.
Right. Yeah.
Comment something in a way that is inappropriate, and he's just checking. So is she laughing at my joke? Does she seem compliant with that? Or is she reacting against that? It's a little it's an early kind of, they're taking the temperature of it.
Yeah. Testing the waters.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I get that. That's interesting. That's interesting to see. I think that's interesting to teach that also to people from a young, at an early stage, to go, right, a joke can be a joke, and then there might be some there might be an agenda behind it.
100%. And then you're looking at pattern of behavior, because like, so if you made like an inappropriate joke, I think I would probably feel confident to call you out on that joke, and we could even have a laugh about it if it's inappropriate. And I don't think that would be you being creepy. Because, you don't come across as a creepy kind of guy. There are lots of people in the martial arts world who 100% do come across as creepy, and they'll say the most inappropriate things with no idea how inappropriate they're being. And I'm just like, dude, what the, but, and, I know Claire and Jess have got some awesome stories along those lines as well. Because it's a very male-dominated world. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, so what you're saying there is that it's learning to look for patterns of behavior and understand when that can be potentially a problem. Same with kid stuff, bullying, one-off incidents. We all make mistakes. Sometimes we can offend people. But if somebody is systematic, they know maybe that they've offended you and they're doing it again on purpose. At that point, we have a problem, and it's a problem that needs to be dealt with earlier. The sooner the better. And I have to say, in most of our experienced schools are not very good at dealing with this, and they have something that Jamie and I have looked at a lot, and Chris, my partner at VPAM. It's like schools tend to run their own legal system, which is completely outside of the UK law, and it's kids can get assaulted, and if they preemptively strike or they counterattack, then the school's just like, oh, there's fault on both sides. And I think schools need a lot of education about laws. So when you're talking about self-defense, I'm using it kind of in a broad sense, but usually when I'm using it professionally, I will say personal safety, or I will say self-protection, because self-defense is a legal term.
Exactly, that's what I was going to say to you. It's a legal term. It's something that you use in a courtroom to try to get yourself out of what you had to do. About bullying, I mean, you spoke about quite a few things that I'd like to kind of maybe get into, but let's start with the last thing that you spoke about, which is bullying. Hello.
Yeah, sorry, we will inevitably be disturbed by cats.
No problem. There's not a disturbance at all. So when it comes to bullying, and that is something that I have been victim of, I think that this has been one of my main motivation to learn how to defend myself and how to fight, was the bullying. And so for me, like, I mean, I'm not gonna unroll all my story. I'm gonna make really the short version, but really what has happened in my life is I remember being scared of going to speak to my parents about it. I remember to be scared to go to speak to teachers about it because of the threat of repercussion of, that I would get it after school if I did, and that sort of thing. And I mean, I've been in some places more than once where I've been in a fetal position on the floor where I had like 10 young lads kicking me in the in the back, in the head, in the legs, everywhere. So I know what that is, And on another hand, at first when that happened, I was living with my mother and my stepfather, who I really, he's been with us for 10 years. So he was more like my father than my actual father. But at the same time, I was, I had this thing with my father where my father was my hero, because my father was this big, strong military guy in the police forces. There was an instructor, a hand-to-hand combat instructor, shooting instructor. He was like the proper hard man of reputation. Maybe even now that I got older, my father isn't really a hard man of reputation. Don't get me wrong, he's capable, but he's not what I would call a hard man of reputation. Now I know the difference. But back then when I was a kid, that's what I thought of my father. And, my father was always like, right, fighting is not good, but if you're getting bullied, you need to stand up for yourself. And so I remember one time where they broke my collarbone. I've been pushed in the stairs, and my collarbone broke. And that was a bit like the, how do you call that? That was the cherry on the cake sort of thing, yeah? And my mom rang my father so that he could come from Paris, because we were living in Lyon, a different city on the other side of France. She called him for him to come and spend a week with me, because she was working and I had a hand in the sleeve and stuff. And when he arrived, he said, right, don't tell anything to your mother. We're going to go out. You're going to walk in front and you're going to point them out to me. And that's what I did. And he followed up, and he went to see and these were obviously all the guys from the school, yeah, because the school was like, I wasn't the youngest and they were in the higher class type of thing. And so he went to see them, and he scared them. I mean, he had his gun on the side and stuff, showed them his badge and everything. He's kind of give them the freaks, And then for a whole year after that, everyone was like, "Oh, Julien, how you doing, man? You all right?" Everybody was really nice to me for a whole year after. So, yeah. But then when that happens again, I had a click where I said to myself, "Look, I try to speak to adults, and it doesn't freaking work. I'll speak to adults. It's the same with the police. I'll be honest with you. You experience exactly the same thing as a kid being bullied, as you experience as an adult." Being victim of crime, and you go to the police and you have to fill a form and you have to do this and that and you have to wait and nothing is getting done unless the police arrive just at the moment they catch the individual red-handed. Then something is going to happen, but otherwise no. So I really not quickly, but one day I just went from one extreme to the other. I started to fight back, and I started to fight hard, because I had enough. And so I'm still in two minds with this, when it comes to bullying. If I have a daughter she's 14 years old now. She lives with her mother. So I don't really, I don't really have that daddy role, because I don't live with her. But I can imagine myself, if I had, if she was living with me, and maybe when she was younger or even now, and she had some bullying problem, yeah, I would tell her to fight back. I would tell her, because I think that's something that kids need to know as well, because we're teaching kids, it's not good to fight back. Just tell adults, tell. But I'm sorry, but that's not building real people. That's building victims.
So I'm going to jump in. I have there's two different aspects to what you're saying, and both really, really important. And I'm definitely not disagreeing with you. The kids need to have those skills. They absolutely need to have those skills. And we're even teaching weapon awareness to kids from 7, 8 years old. That program as well. But and I'm teaching 4 and 5 year olds. I teach them Rich's baby shredder. I teach them the smushy face technique for getting kids off them and that kind of thing. We're still teaching physical skills, even from an early stage, but in such a way that protects the child from the then we teach them the narrative. We teach them how to manage the aftermath as well, and to make sure that they're articulating the decisions that they've made in a way that makes it clear why they weren't at fault. But that's a slightly side issue. The other thing that we teach from a very early stage is ways of speaking to adults to make sure that stuff gets done.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. Go on.
It's a super important thing, and it's something that I've learned from dealing with the kids in my karate school, because you have really, really good kids that end up in there's kids that I had some kids that got mugged in the station, I think somebody needing money for drugs, what have you, and on this little group, they were 3 girls all together, and they took their money, and the kids did the right thing. They handed over the money, all the rest of that. And then they went to try and speak to the adults at the station guard, not even vaguely interested, did not care what had just happened to them, the trauma and all the rest of this. And And that was one of the reasons though why we started to put that into the program, because there are very good, and for the littlest ones, I teach them how to get an adult's attention, understanding that teachers are often like really busy, they don't want to be distracted and all the rest of that, because the teachers are underpaid and overworked and overloaded and all the rest of that. So making sure that they have like secured, is this a good time to talk to you? I have something important that I need to say. I need to ask you about something, getting good eye contact and making sure that they're making it possible for the adult to understand that something important is pending. And that so it's not very easy to brush them off, and understanding that if they don't get that attention, if they don't get taken seriously, then they need to keep going, they need to go to another adult, then they need to recruit their parent, then they need to escalate that conversation with adults until something gets done, and to be taken seriously, and to have the right to be taken seriously as well, even from the age of 5 and 6 years old, to understand that they deserve to be taken seriously, and that they can't be just like pushed to one side. So in terms of what we teach kids, we're teaching them both sides. We're definitely teaching them physical skills, but we're also definitely teaching them ways of communicating with the key adults and identifying which key adults to talk to as well. That's another really important thing. So yeah, those are things that help, I think, in a kind of that anti-bullying type situation, that kids understand what their resources are and what range of options that they have, instead of feeling like you did, that like you've got no choice. Either you get beaten up or you beat somebody up. It shouldn't be that binary. There should be more to it than that.
Yeah. So you know what? I mean, what you just spoke about now was really interesting. I actually had to take quite a few notes of what you said, because I think that's really good stuff that I wish I had when I was a kid. Yeah, because for me, I tell you what, there was not only that going on. There was the fact that I was getting bullied, and the fact that I was getting beat up, and I wasn't fighting back for a very long time. Excuse me. For a very long time, I wasn't fighting back. And so there was the anger towards those kids, and there was the anger towards me for not fighting back. And that, as far as I'm concerned, that has built up. I've done a lot of work on myself in the later years. I've done a lot of shamanic work. I've done a lot of plant medicine. I've had 10 years of psychotherapy that I didn't really give myself to, so I didn't really do much. But I did my own. I took what I needed from it, and I did my own therapy with myself in many different ways, breath work, meditation, and all that. And I realized that a lot of anger have been trapped, because those emotions stay trapped in the body for years and years, and then they manifest in form of sickness and illnesses and mental illnesses. And so I realized that every time I was getting bullied, that anger was getting lodged inside, was getting stuck inside. And eventually that filled me up. At some point when I was like 15, 16 years old, I was such an angry kid. I would, smash things in the house, I'd turn wardrobe upside down, put holes in plasterboard walls, throw my phone against the wall because it wasn't working. All sorts of stuff. A lot of anger, a lot of anger issues, and that was my payback. That was my way. And I was saying to people, don't, like Hulk, don't push me, man. You're not gonna like me when I become all green. Do you know what I mean? And sometimes I did, and unfortunately, I did it at the moment when I was with my loved ones, people that really were trying to help me. So that didn't arrange things. But when you think about little kids getting bullied, there is not only the suffering that they get from getting bullied that's coming into play. There is also self-guilt for not fighting back, for not knowing what to do. Sometimes even not knowing what to do is like you're angry at yourself because you don't know what to do. You're a kid, you don't have that emotional intelligence to go, right, so this is what happened, this is how it made me feel, and this is what I need to do to get better. You just don't have that emotional intelligence at age 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. So I think that what you just spoke about, which is how to speak to adult, who to select, Because when we're a kid and we're at school, there are adults that we get along more than others, and it's better to go and speak to those ones because we know that they're going to listen to us more. So that's and the appropriate time, eye contact, yes, escalate conversation if not taken seriously. I think these are all very important points for kids. And yes, like you said, that there must be an element of learning to stand up for yourself and fight back.
Yes, but just that there are different, and then that looks different for different people. So what that would look like for you is
For me,
going
went
to
from
be
one
different.
extreme to the other, and I'm not gonna lie by saying to you, it felt very empowering when I did. But
Yeah,
I became what I was fighting against. Unfortunately, in a
yeah,
sense, I never started. I'm not a bully in a sense. I'll never start a fight, but I was more than finishing it. Like people had to pull me off people because that's all those years of not fighting back just went exploding in the face of those that tried when I decided to fight back.
yeah, because you've got an awful lot of trauma that's built up there, and that's
Yeah,
going to play a part. And we talked a little bit, I think, we talked a little bit before we came live about the importance of understanding trauma and self-defense education.
absolutely.
And this obviously is something that I've done a lot of with Pam.
Yeah.
I've done some as well with my 500 Rising training, but
Hmm.
primarily with Pam and Rich, their education on trauma is so important, so incredibly important. And Pam's guide for how to manage a room in a trauma sensitive way is one of the most simple and basic and brilliant kind of templates that you could possibly have.
I will do
Um,
it. I want to do their masterclass. For now, it's a bit of a money thing, but when as soon as I can afford it, I'll definitely jump on it.
you should, I mean, and anytime that she does that trauma education, it is I've done it now several times over,
No,
and I get something out of it. And I would tell you that you think people have a conception that trauma-informed education is about, like, if you happen to be teaching a group of women from a domestic abuse shelter or something like that, but that's not true. Every single person in your self-defense class has experienced
yeah,
trauma, is trying to deal with it, is affected by it, and that's part of their context, and it's part of why they're there. And and the same is true of your every single class that you run. So that kind of trauma informed setup is part of has changed the way that I teach karate. It's changed the way that I teach anything. It underpins the way that I approach all students, and it's moved me really quite a long way away from the very disciplinarian. Not that I was ever a hugely disciplinarian karate instructor,
mm,
but discipline is one of the kind of key tenets of karate. And so to understand, and then COVID played a part in this as well, that we all had to reevaluate what was important during that time. And for me, what's important is the community, is the sense of belonging, is the children feeling that somebody cares about them and that they can interact and support each other. And karate is a brilliant way of doing that because it has that kind of empowering aspect to, like, as you've talked about before, doing martial arts is basically fun. It's a great physical activity. It's really good for people to hit stuff in a controlled environment. Skills development is awesome. It's a progressive thing, so you can't just feel like you've just done it. I have kids that start training with us when they're 4 or 5, and they go to university having got their black belt. I will have kids on average like for 10, 11 years. Really a long time with that student, and then now they've got to the point where I've been doing it long enough that they're coming back after university. Which is kind of cool as well. So there's people that are in my classes that have they don't remember a time when they didn't do
yeah,
karate, and they're young adults now, and that's a really cool thing. So the act of martial arts training in itself is a really like positive and therapeutic thing.
yeah,
But it's really important to make sure that like trauma informed teaching underpins that also, because on any given day, you have to respect the students in the room.
yeah.
Like, kids can come in and maybe somebody took their football at lunchtime, or stomped on them in the playground, or maybe they just didn't get to sit at the table they wanted to sit at. But that's a really big event for them. and they need to be able to process. And the kids bring all this stuff into class, and we have like every single lesson we have a little check-in where they tell us, you know, even the latest ones are good, medium, bad. Is there anything you want to share with the group? And then we'll have some kind of mad silly question that will get them critical thinking, because that's an important part of martial arts education as well. You don't just one way of doing things. Like yesterday's with the middle group, we said, if you could choose, would you rather have wheels that could grow out of your feet, or would you rather have an eye in the back of your head? That was the question of the day. And they were brilliant with that. They were just, they really got into it. And you're like, well, how is this karate? It's still karate, because in that sense, they are learning to think, to develop, to articulate, to debate with each other. And all of those skills are really important for them in their life, and to be listened to and taken seriously. And I have, like, there's one kid, he's maybe 8 or 9, and he's quite a shy kid, and he just comes in, he says, Sensei, he says, what's the question going to be today? Because I've been thinking about it ever since I woke up, wondering what it's going to be. And I'm just like, wow, that's so cool. You know, yes, he's going to learn his kata, and he's going to hit pads, and he's going to learn how to escape from pins on the ground, and he's going to do all of these things. But he's also going to feel like somebody cares how his day was. And if he has an issue with kid at school, then he's going to bring it into that. That's what they'll often do. You know, if they have an issue, if somebody's been difficult with them at school and they haven't told a teacher or anything like that, it'll come out in group. And that we'll kind of then, as a group, will problem solve with them. We do a little brainstorm. What would you do in this situation? How can we help him? You know, and all the rest of that. And which adults should he tell, or how is that going to work? But you know, and then you know, we do silly, like crazy questions, and they enjoy that as well. So, you know, it's not your traditional martial arts class.
So you know what you said is like you're building a circle of trust straight away, so that now you're giving them a safe space to come forward and share if there is anything, you know, that's happening to them.
Yes.
That is really cool. That is really cool. Now, and obviously there's not a lot of places like this, unfortunately. Now, just a question. I'm a person, I believe in equilibrium. I believe in the balance between energy, you know, the yin and the yang. And so on one side, we're speaking about how to make your classes traumatized people friendly. This is one aspect. So this is kind of one side of and then there is the old school traditional martial art toughness that has got a role as well. You know, I mean, I wouldn't be the martial artist that I am today if my classes weren't hard. You know, so I what made me at first was my first martial art that I stuck with for quite a while, and that made me was Kyokushinkai karate.
Which is
and
tough.
It's tough. It's tough. It hurts. The conditioning is horrendous. But that's what made me. That's what made my punches, my kicks, and that's what made me able to take punishments. You know, that the first thing anyway before Thai boxing and all that. So how do you find the balance between the two? Because both are important elements.
Yeah, so I have a lot of opinions on this. So you'll have to stop me if I start to rant too much.
No problem.
It's definitely a possibility, especially having been a woman in martial arts for like 20 years. I did 10 years of BJJ, and you know, that's an incredibly male-dominated environment in which, like, so I'm very big into inclusive teaching, and you know, one of my close friends in karate teaching makes the point that if you go in for, if you have that Kyokushin, the traditional Kyokushin approach, you're going to have maybe the toughest dojo in the county, but every single guy that's in that dojo, and it will be mostly men, like, would probably have been okay anyway, because it's a self-selecting thing. The people that cope with that degree of hard training, you know, they stick with it, and they're like, oh yeah, maybe the man that I am, which I completely understand that point of view. Everybody else has buggered off to somebody else's dojo or has stopped training at all because they felt like they weren't strong enough. They felt they failed. They felt that it was too hard for them. And the way that sparring is taught in a lot of places is very much, you're in at the deep end. You're going to get punched in the face a lot. And if you can handle that, that's great. And if not, then you're going to leave, which is why in karate, so many students leave at like orange or green belt, because they get through the early stages and then they start to get hit in the face. And at that point, they're like, I would rather not get hit in the face. I think I'll stop. And they might tell themselves different stories about that. Oh, you know, I wanted to take up gymnastics, or my, you know, my underwater basket weaving class clashes with that time and I just can't do it anymore, whatever. But ultimately, it is that if you're not enjoying your sparring, ultimately people will quit. Now, there are some people that will enjoy that kind of pain, and they're often quite traumatized individuals or people that come from a very, very school of hard knocks background. But the majority of people that are going to benefit from your martial arts training, and obviously I teach a kids karate school, so I don't want them, you know, breaking their noses and chipping their teeth and giving each other concussion. I want, but what I found is that I'm much more successful in building tough brown belts if I work on how they spar early on, so that it's much more playful. We do a lot more pad work than we used to do. So it's like impact is for the pads, and then technique is for the body. So with the kids now, their sparring is good, and their grappling is improving all the time, and so on. I've got some, you know, some kids at 11, 12 years old. They're managing a really, really good range of pad holding and hitting, and that they're transferring that more and more into their, more confidently and competently into their like free range sparring. But they build it up so much more gradually than we used to, because it used to be like, now you have this grade, put your pads on, get a mouth guard, go and get hit. You're now meat for the higher grades because you don't know what you're doing and they're going to have fun with you because, you know, you're a beginner.
It should be progressive, and that's where you get like play sparring, where you know, just to the body at first. That's what Lee Hasdale was saying the other day.
Yeah, I didn't see that. Yeah,
it was a great. I mean, it's a 5.5 hour long thing, but if you can watch it.
You're absolutely joking. How did you talk for 5.5 hours?
Well, Lee and I, we speak quite often, and when we speak, we generally have long chats about very deep stuff. So we talk about such a deep stuff that we just don't see the time passing. But he was saying to me that a very good way to teach your students to get used to sparring is to at first teach them not to hit the head, just spar and punch to the body. So that will get them more confident to. That's the same in Kyokushinkai. In fact, my Kyokushinkai training was no punch to the head. It was all punches to the body, and it was hard enough. Don't get me wrong, but you know,
no, I'm sure
boxing. You know, it's when I got to boxing and Thai boxing, I was like, whoa, you know, it was a new dimension of it. But I'm glad that I've had this
step in. I think if it's done sensitively, then that can work. I mean, I've had this conversation with Jamie as well. I think he had the similar conversation with Lee Hasdale actually. That because I teach them like 6, 7 years old. I'm teaching them head defense right from the off, but I'm teaching it with control. So for them, because they're most likely to get hit in the head, right? So learning to protect their head. I did I sat on a black belt panel once for a kids karate school. And their junior black belt involved not being hit in the head at all. And I just think they're just learning to defend the wrong part of the body, you know, and for me, the head is a primary target.
Oh yeah, absolutely. People headhunt.
And yeah, exactly. And so even for me to get the little ones hands up always right from the start, like I want their hands where they're going to be useful. So we do get them striking and parrying like at that level, but careful.
What I'm trying to say is that is it done in sparring?
So they do, at that the littlest ones do very controlled sparring when they get, but as soon as they're absolutely, the head is a target for my guys as soon as they start free sparring. 100%. But they have to be able to demonstrate good control, because otherwise, you know, I take them out. That's super important.
How just something that you just said, how do you deal with kids that are going a bit too hard, that might be a bit of bullies sometimes? How do you deal with those kids in your class?
They get told, they get warned, they get taken out. If I was like, if I can't trust you, you need to understand that, you know, because everybody can make mistakes. I'm one of the worst for that.
Mm-hmm.
Damn, I accidentally hit you too hard. Like my any of my friends that are watching this will now jump on and go, yes, that is true. And I'm always really sorry, but it happens. You know, it happens from time to
Of
time.
course, it happens
Yeah.
to everyone.
But like we talked before about pattern of behavior in a template, you know, I know if I've got a kid who is hitting people too hard, and they're sometimes it can be if they are neurodivergent, and then they're not necessarily reading very clearly. You know, that can happen, and then so that's an important part of their journey, because often they very much don't want to hurt the other person. And so we work a little bit backwards into learning how to read. So if the other person's no longer coming forward, if they're covering up, if they're not, if you can see that the sparring is no longer going like in a 50-50 kind of way, then we need to self-check and, you know, all the rest of this. And as long as they have a system for working on that, then that's one thing. But obviously you also get the kids that like hurting other people. They're not very, common, but they often they get warned, they get sat out, and sometimes they, you know, ultimately they're going to leave because my environment is not the right environment for breeding bullies.
Yeah. So you see, I was gonna say the type of martial arts or the type of combat form that attracts psychopath generally is bare knuckle boxing, lead
Yeah.
way, and you know, like the most permissible, most violent forms out there, and boxing and Thai boxing. I mean, there's quite a few people like that in there, but generally, in my experience, the gym where I go is one of my best friends' gym, Panikos Yusuf, who's one of the top fighters in the world. Is the 3-time world champion in Thai boxing. That's really good guy, very gentle, very humble guy, you know. But when you when you go and have some food with him, or when I go to his house or he comes to my house, you know, very nice, gentle, mellow guy. When you train with him, he's completely different. It's very fucking strict. But I'm telling you, if there is any bully, I've only once or twice seen that happening. Guys that were coming and hitting people a bit too hard, and Panikos went, "You come here."
Yeah.
Bam, 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 bam. Just fucking kicked him all over the place. Controlled though, not to hurt him, but just to make him understand that, you know, if you want to do that with other people, I'll do that with you all day long. And generally, people calm down straight away. So that's that's another way to kind of deal with bullies.
So that's a perfect example of boundary setting. In that, when we talk about if that person is a good person and you're explaining here's the line, and they respect that line, if they then get it and respect that line, that's a very successful interaction.
Yeah.
If they then continue to ignore that boundary, then that obviously is a big red flag, predatory type behavior, and then you're like, okay, so I'm moving that person into a different category. So exactly that sometimes people just don't get it, and they need to have it explained to them, and sometimes that explanation works best as a punch on the nose. That's, you know, we all learn a lot from that. I read a really good article maybe 12 or 14 years ago about how much you learn about yourself when you first get hit in the face, and the way that you react to that. It's such a it was a really it was a great article, and it was written by my friend Sam, a Korean martial arts writer over in the States, and it was very cool, because everybody reacts differently. And then, you know, in terms of, like you talked about, your awareness of yourself, and how you're going to respond to different situations. I found it quite cool. But there is that. But if you're not learning from that, if you're just continuing with your own behavior in the same way that it was, then, you know, then that is somebody that you don't want to have in your training environment.
Yeah.
So that's where I would draw a line for sure.
You see, one thing that really made me evolve, and that was in my training in combatives. When we started to work scenarios where we have to deal with multiple assailants, and you know, in the combatives, it's you got all that inoculation stage of I mean, it's part of something that I teach, where you have to be able to stand in the middle for 10 seconds while you have 4 big guys punching the shit out of you. and this is full contact, and it's kind of really trying not to get knocked out, so you get rocked. But that sort of training might seem really harsh for certain people, but gosh, it did a lot for me. Like, because you realize that you're not made of sugar. Like people don't know how much they're able to take. Like, you don't break a person that easy unless you know exactly what to target and you're good with your weight transfer. You understand correct application of body mechanics to build a solid kinetic chain and all that. Then yes, but I think that impact inoculation and certain drills that we have against multiple opponents that are meant to kind of build emotional toughness, like resilience, kind of, right, I'm in the middle, I'm getting punched, but right now, instead of being in that victim stage where I'm like, oh shit, I'm getting punched by 4 big guys, in my head it should be, right, I'm calm, I'm waiting for my time, I'm waiting for my moment, and as soon as they stop, it's my turn. Do you know what I mean? It's a different mindset, and I like that too.
Yeah.
I think it's really finding an equilibrium between both, because if we go back to trauma now, I more and more, and it's funny, I know that the universe sends us what we need at the right moment, because more and more that I'm getting interested in violence prevention, I realize that the private students that I'm getting for, like, private sessions, more and more I have this type of person that have got a problem, a traumatic problem, and now they're like, right, I need some help with this, and I find that they're actually speaking to me. They're actually telling me some pretty personal stuff about, can be about their father, about their partner, about their parents, about anything. And I feel a bit like a doctor, where I'm like, right, I got confidentiality. I can't speak about it because these people trust me with some really personal stuff. But I realize more and more that now it's not only about teaching people how to fight. A lot of people that come to see me have got difficulties accessing aggression, and in a sense, that's something that's very important as well. In some aspects, is that there are people that are just freezing in the face of adversity. They're like, oh, they feel themselves getting very, very, very small, and they just freeze, and then they get this guilt of, why did I not say something? Why did I not set boundaries there and then? Why did I not fight back? Why did I not do this? It's the same like the woman that's maybe like 50 kilos, that is victim of domestic abuse. She's going home every night to a husband that's drinking and that's violent and aggressive, and somehow she still loves him because she's got kids with him, and she doesn't know what to do. She's proper confused, and she's coming to someone like me to teach her how to fight and how to deal with this. But so that's another thing I wanted to get into: domestic abuse. What are the we were talking about personal security habits, okay? What are the personal security habits that you would teach to a woman that is being victim of domestic abuse, and she's got nowhere to hide? She's got to go home every night to a husband that's drinking, that's being aggressive, and the kids, she's thinking about the kids as well. She wants what's best for the kids, but at the same time, she's taking all that pressure on herself. So she's denying her own well-being just for the kids. So how do you deal with this?
So one of the things I'm going to say first is going back to what you're saying about when people talk to you, is the importance of people will disclose things, and we, as we're not therapists and we're not medical professionals, and I'm always really, really clear on the safeguarding aspects of that, because like in this hypothetical situation where you're talking about right now, the woman and the children in that relationship are at risk. And if we have information about, and this has happened to me multiple times over the course of my teaching career, is information will come my way that I know I have a responsibility to pass on for the benefit of those there. And so I never promise confidentiality. I'm always very clear with people that anything that they tell me, I cannot necessarily keep confidential. To be honest, they will probably tell you this stuff anyway, Julian. They will, because what they've done is they recognize, they have that, what we talked about, circle of trust. They feel like you're somebody that they can trust, and they want to consult you. And if they are at a point where they're willing to do that, then actually confidentiality is maybe less important to them than moving forward on their terms of their safety and the safety of their family.
Yeah.
But often, by the time somebody in that situation is starting to talk about it, they're not ready to leave yet. It will, and sometimes it will take them a few times before they manage to leave. And then at those points, they will lose their friends. They will lose the support of their family, because people will go, I don't know what she sees in him. I don't know why she keeps going back to him. I don't understand. And people do not understand. And I have been in that situation myself. You end up completely isolated from everything. And it gets to a point where, and that's, that is the behavior, that is coercive control all over, that their systematic separation from the people that would care about you and step in and advise you, is part of how it works, and so the fact that people are prepared to talk to you and ask you about this is really, really powerful, really powerful. But from the safeguarding point of view, then it's always good to know from your perspective as an instructor that you have people that can support and advise you also. So like if I have kids in my school that I have seen that they are at risk, then we're lucky in Oxfordshire, we have a multi-agency safeguarding hub. So you can report situations. You can report situations anonymously, and they link up with the other agencies around that family, and they make sure that the kids are looked out for and are okay, for example. But in terms of personal self-defense in that situation, when it comes down to it, the woman herself will most likely know what are the signs of escalation, what are the triggers, and then it becomes perhaps, again, we're talking about mitigation, we're talking about de-escalation behaviors, we're talking about so advanced de-escalation skills can be useful. And then, when things are that bad, it's naive to think that you can fix it, but we can't fix it, but we can support, we can offer some empowering choices, and we can also prepare, because ultimately what will probably be necessary is that she will need to take the children and go, which is the most dangerous time. There's a fantastic book I read recently at the recommendation of Sarah McLeod in Scotland. This one. This one's like this is like the 8 stages towards 8 stages to murder. Basically, it identifies, it shoots down a lot of myths, and it looks at coercive controlling relationships, not just male, like not just female victim ones. There's also examples of there's a one there where the woman has killed her husband, and like how that came about, and what were the stages, what were the early signs, and because if people are educated about those things, maybe that will give them the power to leave earlier if they are at that level of danger, because obviously domestic violence is an extremely dangerous situation. That is a hothouse. The most likely place for a woman to be killed is in her own home. That's overwhelmingly true. And when you think about, if you look around a house that you're in and you think about that, we talked about incidental weapons before and all the rest of that, it's no place for a fight. It's no place to have to defend yourself. And
you need that sanctuary as well. You know that yourself. We all need this safe space, sanctuary that we can call home. If you don't have this, I don't know you, but I've been homeless for a while. I've been how do you call that, sofa surfing type of thing, for a while. And I was like, it was it was horrible not to have my own place, like to always not feel that I have my space. We're so lucky in a way to have our own space. If you don't have
Yeah.
that, you just go crazy inside.
I feel like that for my girls in India,
Mm.
like a lot of them that have come from like really poor backgrounds, and they have, when you think about Cooper codes, we talk about, your code white. If you don't have anywhere where you can have a code white, then you're just going to be exhausted, and
All the time, yeah.
it will come and catch you.
Mm.
Like Sangeeta, like she has to sleep, but she doesn't have anywhere. Sorry, this is the other one. I'm gonna say hello, Mama. Yeah. Sorry, he's really dumb. He doesn't, get life or people or anything, do you, sweetie? Yeah, he's definitely a victim of prior trauma. It's taken him quite a long time to work through that, haven't you? He's a rescue cat.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Siamese, yeah.
yeah, he is. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, in that sense, you're absolutely right that we all need a code white. We all need a safe space, and if we don't have that as human animals, it's extremely bad for us. And that tension will, it takes, like you were talking about, it will find places to sit in your body, and it will unleash itself at unhelpful times, and it's it's an unsustainable situation, and yet even so people can sustain that for a very, very long time, particularly when they're very emotionally conflicted, because it's just as easy as he's bad, she's good. That's just not. These relationships become very intractable.
Yeah.
And when you're in a controlling relationship, you often don't know that you are, because you lose perspective.
Yeah.
And you often also, you recognize that, but at the same time you think, I can heal that person. They're only doing this because they're also, hurt people, and I can change, he can change,
There is
we can
hope.
change.
There is some type of hope somewhere, and
Or even then you're like, well, I don't want to be homeless.
yeah,
At least we have see, I don't want to disrupt things for the children.
yeah,
It's better for the children to have, it's not always better for the children to have a complete family if that's a very toxic environment. But the kind of things that you tell yourself, there's sometimes the work that has to be done seems like overpowering and overwhelming, as opposed to just getting through the next half an hour,
yeah,
the next hour, the next day, which, although difficult, once it's done, and then the sun comes up again and you're like, oh well, I survived that.
yeah.
Because we tend to be like, we repeat our behaviors, and we think, well, I have survived this far, therefore what I'm doing is right because I have survived. Right? So it's difficult to get people to change that sometimes, because at some kind of primal level, what has got them this far means that they're still here.
Yeah, and they don't understand that they could be getting to a breaking point eventually.
Yeah.
When you were talking about the color codes, and I remember yesterday to one of my private students, I was saying to him that I use the color code as anchor point in NLP style, where I'm just kind of when I'm going out, I'm like, right, code yellow now, flick the switch, code yellow on, calmly observing my environment. I do that while I'm thinking about my own thing. I'm always between code yellow and code yellow alpha anyway, because that's me. I've been doing close protection. I've been working the doors for a long time, so it's just part of my process. And then when I go back home, I'm like, right, okay, switch off now, code white, back code white. I mean, generally that's before I go to bed. Yeah, that I really fully go code white, because even now I'm talking to you, I am receptive to you. I can hear what's happening outside. If anyone is getting in the house, I would hear it. I'm still kind of alert to a certain level. But I think it's important. Any good things like the color codes or the OODA loop or things like this, to use it in a neuro linguistic programming format. Use it as an anchor point with visualization and other buttons or switches. I use that a lot in my head, because I'm like, right, okay, now it's time for this work mode, relaxed mode, or
Yeah.
I think that's important.
And when we're teaching these things, these are things that are going to help people live better lives. And they all have it. It's like, okay, so when you cross the road, you're in a code yellow. You're not spending your time going, oh my god, that car's going to run me over. Oh my god, you're just like car, bus, bike.
Call it,
and
it.
yeah, exactly. Where like Rich says with the give it a name game. So which is basically a code yellow education. So yeah, and it's just very chilled. And if people, with all of these things, if people can understand and articulate this kind of safety behavior, then, and make it, as you're saying, make it part of their everyday life, then they're going to live safer and happier lives. And that's what we're here for at the end of the day, is, helping people live safer and happier lives. And then also you get to that kind of first aid situation where if, there is a crisis, then they need to know what is the most effective way of dealing with that crisis, whether it be a physical altercation or whether it's somebody dropping down with a heart attack or something like that. We have to have emergency skills, but it doesn't, like my friend Christopher always says, it's like, you need to know that the pilot you're flying with knows how to crash land the plane. He may never have to crash land the plane, but he needs to have that skill. And for most people that we're dealing with in our self-protection classes, hopefully they will never need the skill. They need to know that they have it.
Yeah.
But they also need to know how to avoid needing it.
Yeah. So it's always better to prevent than to have to heal someone or to treat somebody's wounds. Do you know that there is another game that I like to teach when it comes to awareness? Is the game of cross and check.
So, I don't know that.
So basically, it's quite simple. Is you're walking and you're observing. If you got time to go on to a yellow alpha now, it's more of a yellow alpha game where now I'm walking, and if I see people first, it's a check. If people see me first, it's a cross.
Oh, cool.
So that forces me to kind of really observe my environment and kind of, I'm not like, head on the swivel that much. I try not to make too many big movements with the head. The eyes are going everywhere around. If I need to look a little bit there, I'll make a little movement and I'll look there and I'll gather the information. Do you know what I mean? That's a pretty good game as well. Cross and check.
Cross and check. That's really funny. I had this kind of mental image that if you were doing that in our town square and I was looking at you, I'd be like, I'm sure that guy's carrying a knife. Just because I'm looking at suspicious behavior.
That's what I'm saying. Don't 1 second, I need to plug that computer. That's why I say don't move your head too much. It's just the eyes. And there is another game that I like to do as well. Something that I teach my students as well is like, if you just sit at the terrace of a narrow cafe or and just observe, you go in a city center somewhere, any city has got the city center, and just observe people and try to give yourself as much information about the people. So using something that I call the 4 modes of communication, which is my baby, something I created. The first one would be long distance visual communication. So from 100 meters away, what can you see? Generally, you can see how people are dressed and how they're moving, their physiology, how they're moving. That already will give you some sort of information about the person, because from that distance, you can't see eye contact, you can't see anything else. You can just see body language and the way they're dressed. The second one would be shorter distance visual communication, where now they're maybe like 50 meters away, and now you can have a look a bit more in depth, how they move, their body language, how they're dressed, are they carrying anything, are they holding anything. Eye contact, what are the eyes saying? Is the person making eye contact or avoiding eye contact? If it's an eye contact, is it a prolongated eye contact or just a short normal eye contact? Is he frowning? Does he look happy, or he or she happy or sad, or all that stuff? And then the third one would be verbal distance communication, where now it's like 20 meters away. If somebody was talking to you 20 meters away, you'd know they're talking to you because they're looking your direction. You'd see facial expression. You'd see, once again, body language, and you would be able to hear what they say. So the 55% body language, 38% auditory cues, and 7% word. And then the last one would be physical communication. So physical distance communication, which is like 0 to 2 meters to 0 meter, basically. And that's physical communication. There's two forms of physical communication: positive physical communication and negative physical communication. Negative physical communication would be fighting. Yeah. So this is where you sit at the terrace of a cafe and you just observe the people and give yourself as much information about them before they get close to you. And if you see groups of people, try to have a look at what we call the hierarchy. The how do you call it? The social hierarchy. So try and see if you got a group of 3 or 4 males and 1 female. Have a look at who's got the attention of everyone. Generally everyone is going to be looking at that person, and you'll see the body language. They'll be more confident and they'll have a bit of a swagger going on. And then you have maybe one in a group that's not very confident, hands in the pocket, closed body language, looking down, looking below eye line. And you try and kind of spot what type of person you have in that group and see who the hierarchy of that group. I think that's a pretty interesting drill to do as well. This is all to do with awareness, behavioral awareness, situational awareness. So I think these are games.
Yeah, they're very important games,
because people don't really teach that stuff. I mean, people like you and I do. I know there's a few good people that do, but people that teach self-defense don't really teach that sort of thing, and that's too bad,
because I mean, if you have a situation like that and you're learning to, that's where you've trained yourself to look out for those things, you're sure as hell going to, you see that trouble coming a mile off.
Oh yeah.
And you could be like, oh, and sometimes you get this, that, oh, well, I could handle myself. Yeah, but what if you have your kids with you? What if you're taking your elderly mum to the optician?
Can't just pick up everyone and run.
Yeah, I had one of my students who's now a black belt, really good lad. He had this situation where, and he said himself, so he took a shortcut through. It was only 9 o'clock at night, but it was dark. So he had a friend who's a girl, and smaller, no fighting experience. Generally, not somebody like in terms of Bob Breen, where he'd be like, you're going to throw your granny at the assailant or whatever, put anything between you and the other person if they have a knife or whatever. That's he would joke about the things that you would throw at them or between them. But ultimately,
I like Bob Breen.
Oh yeah, Bob's awesome. But they were confronted by like maybe 16, 17-year-old lad who was doing like a gang initiation. We get a lot of that around here. And basically he was sent with the mission that he had to rob them. And like Ruben's young and fast and all of those things, but he couldn't just dump the girl and run away. There was no way she was going to be able to run to escape. So he was like, well, we're in it now. I have to deal with this situation, and did exactly as he should have done. That they said, no, we'll hand over our valuables. He'd worked so hard for his coat that he was wearing. So a poor kid, he'd done a Saturday job in a butcher's shop for ages and ages, and he bought this. The coat was going. He just handed it all over, all the rest of that. But then the guy had big trousers on, big kind of signal that there was something. And he saw him reach into his trousers. At that point, Ruben just hit him. He said he didn't even plan what to hit him with. It just happened to be a right hook came out. That was what came out as a preemptive strike, because he definitely. And so the guy kind of staggered back and he pulled out. He'd got hold of this baseball bat, but he was completely dazed at that point. And Ruben was just like, here is our stuff. We are now leaving, all the rest of that. It was all on CCTV and they had him arrested and all the rest of that. But he was like the kid was badly dazed from getting hit. But Ruben was just like, I saw him go for a weapon, and I was immediately we were already complying.
Yeah.
And it was one of those messy situations where you're just like, well, he kind of second guessed himself afterwards. I'm like, mate, you did all the right things.
Yeah.
You and your friend walked away completely safe. And then the kid was arrested and all the rest of that. It was all dealt with and so on. Obviously, he never got his coat back, but, so it goes. But it was for him, his decision-making process. He said, obviously, my mistake was I went the shortcut. You know, I wouldn't have done that, but I didn't think it was that risky because it was only like 9 o'clock. And I said, well, you know, hindsight's brilliant. And but at the end of the day, he had, you know, he had to protect the girl that he was with, who was very shaken by the whole situation, for sure. But yeah, it wasn't one of those situations where escape was not the simplest of the options. But I was really proud of him. I thought he dealt with it extremely well. Yeah, that's what we train them for, you know, to get there safely.
You see those type of scenarios where you know, people say, "Oh, just run away." You can't always run away, and you know, like what you just explained for him, that situation was a perfect example of how, you know, there are some situations where you cannot run away. You're with your girlfriend, you're with your family, your children, you can't just pick up everyone and run. And then there are people, you know, like myself. If you do the doors, then you know you're not running anywhere because that's your responsibility to be here. And somebody pulls a blade at you, well, guess what? You still need to face it because you're responsible for the infrastructure. Now, are you going to go out and start fighting, or just going to push the guy out and close the door? That's probably going to be the best. You know, that's what I had to do once. So, if we think about all this now, it's like avoidance and escape always a priority. Yeah, we do teach that avoidance and escape, and how do we perceive that situation via observational awareness? You know, good level, high level of observation, see it first, being able to recognize predatory behavior, being able to recognize like pre-contact cues, pre-threat indicators, and trust your instinct. Yeah?
Very so, yeah.
The sixth sense.
Yeah, it's such an important thing. That was a really cool thing when we were working with this group of nursery staff on Tuesday. Like, I think maybe like one or two of them had prior martial arts training out of a group of 16, and some of them were really like their manager said, I would like to supply this self-protection training for them as part of their training day. And a lot of them were like really nervous about it. Oh, it's not me. I don't want to do this. I don't think that I could ever hurt anybody anyway. And all those, you know, lots of misconceptions about that. When you get people that are not there by choice, but because it's part of a, you know, work training placement, then you have it's a little bit of a different context in terms of the buy-in. So we had to create a lot of buy-in right from the beginning and do some trust building exercises and that kind of thing, which was really interesting, and they were brilliant. They all joined in really well, and they did an excellent job. So that was a really good group to work with. But for them, understanding how much of their instinctive behavior is already like very strong for self-protection, and then learning to codify that. And then so a lot of this, but they're working with babies and toddlers a lot of the time, so they're looking at violent primal behaviors all the time. We looked at like the conflict in their daily life, and the list was hilarious because they were like, oh yeah, we regularly get bitten, my hair gets pulled, I'm constantly stabbed with pencils, and all of these different things, because they're dealing with kids that haven't learned how to control those behaviors yet. So actually they're at the hard end of violence because they're negotiating with terrorists all the time, because that's how little kids behave. And they know loads of stuff. Of course, they know loads about de-escalation. They know loads about mitigation. They're doing that all the time with these kids, but they don't give themselves permission to do that in their daily life. They have fantastic boundary setting in the nursery, but they don't necessarily give themselves permission to do that within their family and that kind of thing.
So that's another thing. Go on. Sorry.
No. Okay. So I mean, I'm just saying that sometimes people already have it in them, but they need to understand it, codify it, and give themselves permission to apply it in the broader sense. And that's really empowering because they don't need to learn anything new. They just need to be able to be clear about what they already know.
Yeah. What you just said now is something you see a lot of people know what they're doing in the dojo or in the classroom, or you know, and when things happen to them, they freeze because they get in that state of, oh shit, I don't want to do it, or I don't know what to do. It's like preemption. You know, it takes a lot of courage to actually recognize and go, right, oh shit, is he about to hit me now? Is he about to do something? And I always said to people, if you're asking yourself if the person in front of you is about to hit you, that it's time to hit them.
For sure.
And it takes it takes courage to actually do that, to take the initiative to do that, or even to start fighting back. And I know that because I have experienced that myself when I was much younger, and I was getting punched and kicked, and you know, I always knew how to fight. I mean, I started martial arts when I was 4 years old. You know what I mean? But it's like there was that fear. So it was a fear of repercussion coming from them, fear of getting hurt, fear of hurting other people, fear of repercussion from from the teachers, from the police, from my parents, from, do you know what I mean? So there's all these fears that kick in. And obviously, like I said to you, I went from one extreme to the other eventually at some point, which now I learned to balance, which is good. But you know, sometimes you have to. It's like the analogy of the ship, you know, rocking left and right at sea, and the sea is got that storm going on. That's the storm of life, you know. That's the hardship of life, and you're the sailor inside that ship, you know. If you're spiritual, and the sailor is the soul, and the ship is your body. And you kind of rocking left and right to find the balance in the storm. But you know, you got to rock left in order to, you will rock right. If you rock left, you will rock right, and you will rock left again until you know, it's like standing on a skateboard, you know. You'll fall a good few times before you learn to find the right balance and stay on that skateboard. And so it's
I have to tell you one of my favorite ship quotes, because I think I like it, which is that a ship in harbor is safe, but that's not why ships were made.
yeah.
And I really like that as an analogy, because, you know, we do have to get out there and experience the storms, and it's important to us. Like the bad experiences in my life have shaped my ability to understand and teach other people how to avoid those kind of experiences.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's exactly the same for you. That if we are mindful of the lessons that we're being exposed to, then that can only make us stronger and wiser. I mean, you get that whole "what doesn't kill me makes me stronger," and actually, what doesn't kill me can produce some really negative and bad coping strategies and like traumatic behavior that plays out in dangerous ways. So it's not universally true, but it depends on how we can respond with, you know, wisdom and experience. So yeah, I like your ship analogy. It's cool.
I got one. I got another one for you. What doesn't kill me better start fucking running now. That's a good one. So when it comes to nightlife, okay, we're talking about nightlife, young girls, and you know, going clubbing and stuff like that. You know, when you work in that environment, when you're on your free time, you just want to be left alone type of thing. But when I was younger, I used to go a lot. I used to go out a lot, especially in Eastern Europe, where I grew up, in Latvia, Lithuania. I used to go clubbing pretty much almost every day at some point, because we had clubs that were open during the week as well. That was crazy. But so what would be your advice in terms of personal security habits to those young girls that are going out? What do you think should be those personal security habits for them?
Okay, so one of the most important things is peer support. So for girls of that age, they don't necessarily want to tell their parents what they're up to, but they will usually have a circle of friends that they will trust. So location share, make sure somebody knows where you're at and what time you expect to be back. Have a checking in system. If you're going out in a group, somebody needs to be kind of in charge of safety, and that can be a rotating role. So
somebody that's not drinking.
Yeah, exactly. Because, and you know, this is another thing that Rich is very, very hot on. Like it's a well-known fact that like the escalation in violence in public places where drinking is happening, that you know, it's a huge difficult. So in terms of violence prevention, you'd be like, well, don't go there. But if we're talking about teenagers, then of course, you know, you can't say, you know, this is you can't say ship stay in harbor, because they're young and they want to sail. So then you're like, well, how can we sail safely? And obviously things like not letting anybody else buy you a drink, never leaving your drink unattended, very, very important. I've dealt with people that have had horrendous experiences with like Rohypnol and like woken up naked, not even sure how many men have been handling them, and just horrific experiences like that, which they're then far too ashamed to tell anybody about. And you just like, you would not want that to happen to anybody. So understanding the risks of the places that you're in, looking out for each other. This is really, really, really important. And then beyond that, like good environmental awareness, have you need to have in your head, you know where your lines are. So like if this happens at that point, I'm going to leave. And always like with teens especially, like having them understand that their parents would rather get a call from them at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, I have really fucked up. I know I said that I was going to like Jenny's house. I didn't. I went out with a guy. It's gone horribly wrong. I've left his house and I'm in the middle of nowhere and I'm really terrified and I'm really sorry. Every parent would rather get that call than, she's dead in a ditch. Another thing that's really important with teenagers as well is understanding about getting into cars with people who's driving you don't trust. That's a huge, huge risk. There was another really tragic occasion just local to us a couple of months ago where like the teen that crashed the car was the only one that survived. Everybody else was killed. And now he's got to live with that for the rest of his life.
That is mad.
Yeah. And we all like that happened in my school year. It happens in every school year. That is a thing that happens. And we've sat in a car with somebody and gone, I am terrified for my life right now, but I daren't say anything because it's rude. So understanding that your safety is more important than courtesy, is more important than the other person's feelings. That is a hard thing for people to get past, but it's like understanding how to play through those scenarios so that you can like make an excuse or, I feel sick, I need to get out, anything like that, just so that you can understand how to stop that situation from developing, nip it in the bud always, because that is better than when paralyzed from the waist down.
Yeah.
These are things that, again, you have to work through. What are the risks and how do we mitigate those risks so that we can make the decisions that we want to make and live in a way that we want to live? Kids, older teenagers will, for the most part, not universally, they'll want to experiment with that. So how do they do it safely? And there's always going to be an element of risk, but understanding how to support each other as a peer group, or to pick role models that they trust, because they will want to consult somebody, but it probably won't be their parents at that age. Lucky it is, that's great. Most kids have that profound psychological need to differentiate themselves from their parents at that point, so they will look for different role models that they trust. I had a funny situation in my classes. We were talking about like adults that you can trust a little while back, and we talked about talking to your parents and not talking to your parents, and picking safe people to talk to and who to get advice from and that kind of thing. And one of my lads said to me, he said, I would come to you, I would trust you. I said, 100% know that if you told me something that you were like that was dangerous behavior, that I wouldn't just like shut up about it. I would act on it. He was like, oh yeah, I know. That's why I would trust you. I'm like, okay, fair enough. It's just like, you just get that. They need to know that they're not on their own.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the time, older teenagers can feel so isolated. And if they can understand how to be a good friend to other people, it's the same like with coercive controlling relationships.
Yeah.
That starts often in teenage years. If they understand that they need to keep reaching out to that person whose boyfriend has started to cut them off from the friendship group, if they can understand that as that person, they can continue to reach out, if they are educated about what that feels like, then they're in a much better position to identify it, deal with it, nip it in the bud, support each other through it. But this is kind of personal safety education for teenagers is so overlooked, and it's such an important thing. And there's such, I love working with teenagers. They're so insightful. And every time we go into school and we do a personal risk assessment for all the kids, and they brainstorm it for themselves because they know their local area. We'll research their local area. But we did this. So we did this. There was a group of teens in Hackney, Peckham.
Oh, I know Peckham. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Peckham. It's a dangerous place.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. And these girls we were called in by the school because that basically they were said that these girls were at risk of death. They're violent in school. They're always on the risk of being excluded. We're very concerned about their level of risk outside of school, because often they're from very difficult family backgrounds, and they're already involved in the kind of knife culture of the area. We want them to learn to find non-violent solutions for the problems in their life.
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting remit for us, and a lot of it. So trust building with the girls was challenging, much more challenging than it would be in other schools, because we've been brought in by the school, and they were like, well, the school's our enemy a lot of the time. So why would they do something like that for us? So it took us a while to work on building trust, but that was a really valuable thing. And we could definitely see that even at their young age, they'd been through some very traumatic experiences, and those kind of behaviors were definitely playing out in the interactions that we had and in the group works. But we focused on things that were relevant to them. Like we did a whole section on, I don't normally do knife first aid with teenagers.
Okay.
Only with older students. But for them, it was important, because if they were in that situation, then understanding how to deal with stab wounds,
it was relevant to
them. Yeah. And they respected that. And that, so yeah, we always try and make sure that we're listening to the people that we're working with, and trying to develop suitable material that will help them for what they need. You don't ever have that kind of one size fits all. What are the risks in your life, and how do you mitigate them now, and how can we mitigate them better, perhaps? So I think that's I think that's important, because obviously it's not a template, and everybody's different.
So when you speak about teaching adolescents and teaching children, for instance, that group that you spoke about, that it was difficult to gain their trust.
Yeah.
How do you go about creating that environment of trust, that environment where people can feel safe in sharing, when those people don't really trust you to start with?
Obviously it takes time, and there's certain activities that can help with that. For the stuff that I do with teens, I work with Chris, and we're a good double act. Chris was in the military, and I take the piss out of him a lot, and we're really good friends. So initially, the stories that we tell, which is a very Pam thing as well, that stories can, and Rich too, obviously, it makes you have that kind of, you don't want to make it about you, obviously, but there's a degree to which that helps with empathy, and making it clear that even though we're there in that situation, for example, we're there because the school's invited us in. We are not the school. We are not teachers. We're there for their. I very much respect the schools that are willing to have us in, because they have thought about the needs of their students and beyond the curriculum. This school was genuinely thinking about the well-being of their students, even though they didn't have the trust of the students. But that's because they're naturally going to be very averse to authority because of their past experience. But from the point of view of us, understanding that what we were teaching, so it's also then bringing in authentic material. It has to be truthful. It has to be immediately relevant. It has to be useful to them. And this is where I'm always for me, everything comes down to why. If your students understand the why, then you have them. You're gonna be able to build trust with them, because you're telling them truth, and it's a truth that's relevant to them. So if why we're here is because you're at risk and we can help you be safer, then you go ahead and deliver that, then you're going to build trust. But if you talk nonsense and are clearly unaware of who they are and what's relevant to them, then that's a kind of arrogance, and it's the majority of women's self-defense education is completely unsuitable.
So would you say, for example, that opening up with something that happened to you, for example, when you were their age, and being really honest and sincere about it, would you say that that's a way to kind of build trust? Because they're like, right, I choose to open up about certain thing in front of the class, in front of people, and that'll kind of show them that I'm ready to do it. So I'm kind of making the first step.
That's one of those, like, sometimes not always things, and it's so context dependent. It can be, but sometimes that wouldn't necessarily be the first thing that you're going to do.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Have to, no, I wasn't meaning that in any kind of critical way, but it's like building. So there's just different stages of. Oh, do you know what? There's a really great book that Joe Saunders recommended on building rapport. It's an FBI book. It's probably somewhere on here, and it's some of that kind of stuff is very useful in terms of being really, really technical about how you're building rapport. But at the same time, if you're also genuinely interested in them and who they are and why they're there, then that also helps build rapport. So we have like ice-breaking activities, which I think are really helpful for that kind of thing. So you're not going to kind of go straight in with some really in-depth story, although those are important. But it depends on how long you've got with them, and sometimes even about the setup of the room and the context of the particular day and the size of the group. So often we'll like split them down into small groups and to talk about like some personal information together, some of which they can share with the group or not share with the group, so that they have the opportunity of getting it out there without necessarily feeling that the whole group is going to be aware of it or discussing it or that kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's a long way. The short answer was sometimes, not always. And I think I kind of will wind back to that. It just depends on the people and the place and the remit and the time that you've got with them.
For sure, yeah. So the time is that's one thing as well. It's as a teacher, I realized, and something I'm learning now not to do too much. But when I first started to teach seminars, I was teaching like 8 hours seminars, and I was putting so much stuff in there because I was like, oh, I'm gonna teach them that and that and that and that and that, and I was kind of overloading things too much, and and that's when you realize that the time. That's when I started to think to myself, what if I have only 1 hour, 2 hours with a person? How do I, what do I prioritize? What really is a priority for them, and what is not so much a priority that I can just kind of live it till the next time? And that kind of pushed me to really kind of have a look at everything and separate the things that are not that essential, and just kind of really focus with the strict essential. So what would you say that the bare minimum essential is if you have, let's say, 1 hour with a person that you might never see again?
Okay, so that's because Chris and I have our different templates for different length of workshops, and we usually go in at minimum 2 hours, and we have our framework for what's the essential.
Yeah, I like a minimum of 2 hours myself.
But if you're saying if you're saying 1 hour, then I'll rise to that challenge, because I have that. Like, I come from a background where I was repeatedly told that like self-defense workshops are useless, and really what people need to do to learn to defend themselves is sign up for a martial art and get a black belt and train for 10 years and that kind of stuff. And one of the powerful things about 500 Rising is that focus on, you're probably not going to get them for more than 2 hours, so you stop letting perfect be the enemy of good. What can we teach? If we have this person for 1 hour, what are we going to teach them? So in that 1 hour, I would definitely work with them on red flags and boundary setting, because their biggest well, depending on who they are, of course, if it's a female between like 18 and 50, then most likely I'm going to focus on managing relationships in family and workplace, because that's where her biggest risk is most likely going to be, unless she's coming to me because she has other particular specific risks in her life that she wants to think about. So personal safety habits charging your phone, making sure that your routine is a safe thing, or that you know which bits you need to change, and all the rest of this. Understanding who are the risky people in your life and how to manage them. So all of that kind of awareness and kind of empowering behaviors that she would need, that would be what I would do in that hour. If it were, just looking at that, who is it? It's always going to be like, who is it? And then why are they there? What have they come for? What are they asking me for?
Kind of really adapting to the person that you have in front of you to give them what they really need, something that's suited to their particular individual need.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. You spoke about Joe Saunders. I've not heard of him for quite a while now. I mean, he was a bit everywhere at some point, and I've not really heard.
He stopped doing his pod because he was like he was promoted at work, and so now his particular focus has been like work and family, because the pod was taking a huge amount of time.
Yeah.
But what a legacy he's left in terms of that back catalogue. For me, when I first started getting into self-protection, it was such a gift to be able to listen to everybody that he'd interviewed and go, okay, these are my people, you know. And that's how I found Tammy Yard-McCracken. That's how I found Pam. That's how I found Rich. There's loads of people that I go, okay, because you know exactly how it is, that there are some people that you resonate with and go, this person has what I like. Randy King, for example, I loved him and Joe interviewed each other, and they did a little bit of back and forth, and there was some fantastic stuff. So much respect for him and his like ability to call out just the nonsense that we come across in the world of self-protection and self-defense. And I loved his Devil's Advocate podcast. That was, for me as a former debate teacher, it was really, really cool to see that format and how that played out. So Joe Saunders, and Joe came over.
I've only met him once when I met Jeff Taunton on that.
Oh yeah, on that night in Coventry, because he was down doing the course here, and he went up and down in that evening because he went up to introduce him. That was a big moment for him because obviously.
Jeff I've seen that. Cool. I've never really spoken to him. I think that I'll just put it out there on the open. I think that at that point, my online presence was a bit different than what it is now, because I was trying to fit in a group that wasn't really for me. And, and then I've been told that I had ego and stuff like that. And I think that he must have seen a couple of posts that he didn't like or something. I felt a bit of that. But, anyway, Joe, if you're looking, all my respect to you, man. Love your interviews and stuff. And you doing interviews influenced me doing those podcasts. So, if he listens to, big respect, man.
His own stuff. So the interview that he did with Ben Myers on his de-escalation as a bouncer. Such a good interview. Really, really cool. Because for him, he's a huge guy. And again, not, obviously being a bouncer is a physically a difficult, a risky job anyway. But for him, to that transition that he made between almost turning it into a game of, physical intervention is such a lot of hassle and such a lot of paperwork. I'm going to see how many of these people I can de-escalate. I'm going to turn that into like a little manipulation game for myself, in a way, like a healthy manipulation game. But his like kind of psychology background in terms of managing those situations, I found really, really fascinating. And his really, like, again, he was heavily influenced by Richard Dimitri. A lot of the time, what you see as a bouncer, I'm sure, you get a whole range, but there's that kind of social violence. Sometimes it's just a good person having a bad day. They've had too much to drink. Things are out of control. They've had an argument with their girlfriend or their friends, and it's all gone, or they've lost their wallet, or something really, has happened that has meant that they are having a reaction, and it could go really badly for them. But with sensitive handling,
Yeah.
outcome for them could be a huge amount better. Like if the bouncer is coming alongside that and helping them make good decisions, then that's going to be a better outcome for everyone,
Yeah.
ethically, as well as, you know, in terms of admin and paperwork. So a lot of his de-escalation material is very, very well developed, really interesting, really applicable, and has been really helpful from that. So definitely would recommend. There's some really great stuff that he's put out there, and I really enjoyed working with him when he came over to do Managing Violence over here. It was really valuable stuff.
I will be going back to have a look at some of his interviews. There was some really, really good interviews that I remember as well. You know, there is somebody else that I have a lot of respect for. I did a bit of. She coached me for a while. Me and my ex-partner. It's Melissa Salt. You've heard of Melissa?
Yes, she worked on the same project that with
Okay.
We had a little contact in and around that. Not a huge amount of contact. So I know her a little, not a huge amount.
I mean, I don't know her very well either, but you know, we've had a bit of coaching from her online with my ex-missus, and I kept in touch with her. Unfortunately, she's got a lot of health issues at the moment, so kind of, you know, wish her all the best. I hope she's gonna get better soon and stuff. I wanted to get her on the podcast as well, so hopefully maybe at some point we will be doing that. But I see what you're doing, and that kind of reminds me a bit of, you know, what she used to do as well, in terms of I think she worked in India as well. I think she did a bit.
And she was one of the earliest. She's a pioneer in women's self-defense, and her contribution is definitely in terms of like empowering people and like a profoundly strong mind. Kind of like she has that fierce
feminine. Yeah, I didn't hear the last 10 seconds. It kind of cut a little bit. So what were you saying?
Okay. Yeah, no, I was just looking at her legacy as a, you know, a ferocious instructor, and kind of pointing out that women's self-defense, you know, she took a different direction in women's self-defense. And I think that I know that she's been too ill to continue with that work as it is at the moment, but I think that there will be a body of work there that people will always respect.
That's one thing, and I said that to her. I mean, I really consider her to be like the top, you know, one of the top female instructor out there. And I mean, I'm that type of guy. I'm not gonna lie, I am impressed by her, you know, by her physical abilities as well. You know, she was very combative, very explosive. She had that aggression. For a petite woman like she is, like, I was like, fuck, you know, lady can bang. Do you know what I mean? Like, I was like, so no, definitely. If I can get her on the show, we'll definitely do that. There is something I wanted to speak to you about. You still got time, or?
Yeah. I mean, I will need to go fairly soon, but yeah, hit me with another question by all means. I like to talk about stuff.
Sure. Let's have a look, because there was something I wanted to speak about, and I've noted it. I've quite a few notes on there. So, okay, I know that's a big subject. Okay, now when we're talking about anti-rape scenario and you know, dealing with survivors of sexual abuse and rape, and how would you go about dealing with this with people?
Okay, so in any situation where you've got a room full of women, then you need to kind of, as a baseline, assume that that's present.
Yeah.
And I have, and you know what? Sometimes I've learned that the hard way by making mistakes and upsetting people. You know, that's something that I really regret as an instructor, because But at the same time, I know that one of the things that we can do, if somebody has come to us in that kind of situation, even if they don't feel comfortable to talk about what's happened to them, which of course, it's probably not an appropriate place to be doing that. And we do need to have the resources to be able to guide people towards properly qualified support in that situation. We should always have that in our back pocket. But it's something that with my girls in India is a very, very clear and present danger.
Mm-hmm.
And gets shifted. We talked a little bit before about what would you put in an hour's workshop, what would you put in a day, what would you put in 3 days. And for most people, it involves developing an awful lot of trust before you can start to go as deep as that.
Yeah.
With a group of people that you're working with, because it's very confronting. It's very difficult subject for a lot of women, particularly with a male instructor as well. With my girls in India, we don't have that time, and it's such a key and terror. It's such a key terror for them. We're usually right in there, and that's so we structure things very differently there, because for them, dealing with the terror of sexual assault is it's so much more prevalent, and it's something that they talk about a lot because of the level of danger that they're dealing with. So it doesn't have necessarily quite the same taboo that we have over here in terms of, I don't know, I don't want to generalize on that, but the girls will, at the end of if you have like an FAQ in a women's self-defense situation, very rarely you'll get a question based around that kind of scenario. In India, it's always like, and so the point where we don't FAQ it, we put it in earlier on, because I know it's going to come up, because it's such a predominant fear.
Yeah.
So clearly, if somebody's been traumatized and has past like sexual abuse trauma, then like saying, hey, you deal with it like this, you jump down there and then you jump on top of them and say, now attack me like this, that's going to go very badly for everybody concerned. Very, very badly. So the language that you use around it, the way that you run the drills, this is a very Pam thing for sure. The way that you're looking at how you're handling the teaching of that is really important. But it should be part of the training. So like in our 500 Rising training, I came out of the training and we had done lots and lots of scenario work and lots of technique stuff. And I had very big bruises on my biceps. And my partner was like, what were those? Was that grab bruises? I'm like, no, that's somebody kneeling on my biceps while they're doing like mouth rape.
Yeah.
And we were looking at like techniques of dealing with that situation. By the time you're looking at that, or you're looking at, head down on the table and all different like potential rape scenarios, you're in a very, very murky area with a group that you must have developed a lot of trust with. Because for those to be taught in a way that people can access the teaching instead of just focus on the fear of what's happening, it's a skill in itself, I think. And I think that particularly in my experience, and not universally, obviously, I haven't been to but a lot of the time, self-defense instructors will not go to dealing with those kind of scenarios because they themselves are fearful and embarrassed about it. They're doing the women a disservice, because the women are going to have a lot of unanswered questions that they also don't feel capable of bringing to the table. So it's like with kids, the subject of abuse with children, a lot of the time it doesn't get raised because people feel awkward raising it. It's so important to raise it and normalize the fact that we should be talking about these kind of things. We should be talking about bodily autonomy and consent. And if you're looking at scenarios with women in this country, for example, then who's dealing with date rape? Who's dealing with when that line is crossed between, you've said yes, you've thought yes, but now you're definitely feeling no, but you're not sure you can say that without there being consequences. That is super important. And this is why so many students, and there's a really, really good research study done in Canada where first year, because the rate of rape in first year university students, female university students, was really, really high, really high. And a lot of that is to do with not being able to articulate consent and not having a good understanding of articulation of consent also. So I think these are really, really important topics to talk about, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you as a male instructor have got to be confronting the very worst end of rape and sexual assault. A lot of it means let's wind what happened before, what happened before, what happened before. Where are we looking at articulating consent? Where are we looking at boundary setting? Where are we looking at men's understanding of consent? And thinking about how you as a male instructor have a lot of potential to be educating men in that situation, because is going to come better from a guy a lot of the time. So this whole very disturbing surge in rape culture, the kind of Andrew Tate kind of thing, the rise in teenage boys, most of their sex education is coming from pornography. Most of them are watching pornography. Most pornography is extremely abusive. A lot of teenage boys are surprised that it's not normal for a woman to cry during sex. They're unaware of how that should be going. And so for me, I think that if we're talking about where can a male self-defense instructor really contribute in this, maybe we're really thinking about lads education. Maybe we're really thinking, because that's protecting the lads as well, right?
Yeah.
They don't and shouldn't want to be assaulting women. And that's really what it's coming down to, is learning where is that line? Where is the consent line? Where is assault happening? Why is that happening? And why is it that the education that you're getting from your peers and from the internet is so misleading and so very dangerous?
You were saying as well, when you speak about pornography, like a lot of it is very degradative towards the image of women, like, and although you got a bit more organic type of porn and things like that, very often it's kind of just reflecting traumas, and people are feeding into that from a young age, and it can destroy people, in their life.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I think there's something very unique about all that shit anyway. Like,
yeah, and I think that we're really at a point now where a lot of damage is being done to this current generation, and we're going to have to learn how to deal with that. And there's a big space for men to step up into that, and to lead the way and go, this is how it should be. And in terms of educating teenage boys particularly, I think there's a lot of good work to be done there.
Okay, so kind of treating it from both sides.
Yes.
Do you know when you get people? I mean, you got that argument saying, "Oh, we shouldn't teach women how to fight against like rapists. We should teach men not to rape." And I think both things are right. Like, I mean, we should teach women on one side of things, like you said, prevention, and in the event of the worst case scenario, fighting off. And yes, I think that there's definitely some work to be done on the side of teaching young men the values of treating a woman right.
Yeah, completely. And this is, I think I get that argument, and I also hate it at the same time, because, I think that it's empowering for women to understand how to look after themselves and to be aware of risks, and that it's naive to say that, you lock your house at night. Yeah, people should rob me. I'm going to leave my house open because people know I'm going to lock my house. I, as a woman, I'm going to take steps for my own safety, because I know that historically I'm not safe. So don't tell me that I should. Oh yeah, I know I should be safe, but yeah, so my house shouldn't get robbed. So nobody should smash into my car. Why should I wear a seatbelt? I don't want to wear a seatbelt.
This is
No,
denial. This is complete denial. Like,
much so, yeah, and it's really, really annoying. But yes, at the same time, and then people will say to me, "Well, you should be educating men." I'm like, actually, no, that's probably not my responsibility. I'm working on dealing with the most vulnerable people and teaching them how to protect themselves. There's definitely a space for men to be working alongside men and being really good role models for them, and that's something that is going to come better from a male to male perspective a lot of the time.
yeah. No, that's
So
interesting. That's definitely an avenue that I want to explore a bit more, and just live my positive imprint in this as well.
I think you really could. There's a guy, there's a project called Beyond Equality, and there's an awesome guy who is heavily involved in that, and he helps like men like yourself go in, talk to teens in school. Somebody with your background and experience, with your life experience, could be such a valuable person and really influential in that kind of level. So yeah, I can. There's some really good people out
there. Who is that person?
So I can't remember. He's called Ben somebody, and he runs the Beyond Equality project, which used to be called the Good Lad Project, but now they've evolved that. Some really interesting insights in going into classrooms, and just like again from the not teacher perspective, like they have a whole non-judgmental approach where they're like, tell us what you know, and they have learned so much from that, because just giving boys permission to tell the truth about what their experience is and what they're seeing, they've learned that it's been such an insight, and it really needs to happen. And they've been like really surprised by the extent, but you don't find out that extent unless you create a safe space for them to tell you what they're actually experiencing, because otherwise they're just going to be like, no, we never watch porn, nothing to see here, obviously, because they're embarrassed about it and they don't want to know.
You've mentioned
not helpful.
Sorry.
No, that was it.
Say again. You all right. You've mentioned 500 Rising a good few times. Is that an organization?
Yes. 500 Rising, a phenomenal organization, which was started by Tammy Yard McCracken, who was a student of Rory Miller, and is a good friend of Rory Miller.
Okay.
Rory is now qualified under 500 Rising, as is Randy King. And it is a specific organization which is about women's self-defense. It's not just for female instructors, it's for male instructors as well. But it's about specifically teaching what is appropriate for women. They have they've done a couple of courses here in the UK. There's another couple coming up next year. And I would say for any self-defense instructor that wants to understand more about women's self-defense particularly, I would very much recommend this course. It's a really good balance between supplying what people want from a self-defense course and what they need as well. So it's really good. So that's coming in March of next year, and I've really enjoyed working with them on there. I'm on the Europe, UK and Europe advisory panel group. It's been, they very much kind of go down the line of, this is what we do, and this is the focus of our education. And the whole I have been to places where I've delivered information about what I do and that kind of thing, and immediately the first thing you get is, what about men? And I go, this stuff is available. There's lots of resources out there for men, but what I do, what I've chosen to specialize in, is this. Men and obviously, there's not a shortage. Sometimes it's not necessarily very helpful. As you say, the combatives route is very empowering a lot of the time, but there is the danger that it doesn't necessarily cover, like you found for yourself, everything that you want to find. And there's the danger of imprinting like an excessively violent response or that kind of thing, which is a concern. But that's a whole separate issue, and it's definitely something that I don't have any expertise in. So I'm not going to sit here and talk about something that way more about that than I do. So I'm just going to. So yeah. For me, the key influences, I started doing self-protection training with Jamie Clubb. I listened to a lot of stuff from Joe Saunders, from which I found people that I wanted to train with. Pam and Rich have been amazing and a massive influence on me, as you know.
Yeah.
And 500 Rising has been something that's really helped me hone and fine tune my skills as an instructor and as an instructor of women's self-defense. So these have been really big influences for karate and practical karate, which is obviously what I do mostly.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, like, I mean, Rich and Pam are amazing at what they do, and they're definitely on my list of people to go and learn from.
Coming
So
here,
that's definitely.
end of August next year. We've got a masterclass right here, and we've got a shredder day for those that can't make the master.
Are they coming back next year?
They are going to be right here. I'm hosting them, so you get yourself down here, young man.
I just need to get the money together. That's the main thing. I know it's great. It's amazing knowledge I'm not gonna get anywhere else. But it's like, yeah, I'm kind of struggling a bit with the money at the moment. So I'm gonna need, if I can make it, I'll definitely be on there. If not, that'll have to be in the future. Like,
you know, if for anybody that's like that there's like the 1 day shredder is like your kind of what I call the gateway Pam and Rich. That's a really, really good course, and that'll be Sunday, 1st of September. So get that one in your diary. So it's just
Sunday, 1st of September,
2024.
right? Oh, 2024. Okay, yeah. So next year. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, that was pretty insightful. That was pretty cool. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask you a last question that I ask pretty much everyone, and that is, if you could go back in the past and do something different with your life, would you? And if you would, what would it be?
I don't know. I'd probably like invest some money in something that was going to, because like yourself, as a self-employed martial arts instructor, we don't really have a whole heap of money. That would be nice. But other than that, change a thing, because the good experiences and the bad experiences have given me what I need to do to live my life with purpose. And I'd rather live my life with purpose than, than anything else, really. That's important to me. People that I care about.
That is a good way of seeing things. I'll tell you what, one last one. If you had a group of 500 children aged between 5 and 15 years old in front of you, what would be their advice to them?
My advice to them?
What's your message? Yeah.
Oh,
for the younger generation.
Now that's yeah. Oh, I don't know. That's a really hard question, because for me, working with kids is so much about having them learn who they are, which is a really process, not something that can happen like straight away. So yeah, there's a lot of, look inside yourself, I guess, but that's not something that you can just like snap into at age 6. It's probably, have fun and hit this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Nice one. Okay. Have you got a website? Have you got any courses coming up? Do you have any courses that you sell? Anything that you want to plug in on this? Just be my guest.
Wow, I should have been prepared for this. Yeah. So one of the main things is I'm raising money for our outreach in India. I'm going back in December, and we're teaching self-defense instructors to the next level. And so that's a really, really important outreach. So anybody that can support that would be awesome. Here in the UK, I've got a karate seminar in Devon tomorrow. We're available for violence prevention and management in a kind of non-specialist settings. And we've got Chris and I are teaching for Les Bubka in February. We're doing a women's self-defense day there, which will be really cool. And then on top of that, then the children's self-defense course, Animal Instincts, which Jamie Clubb and I are developing, will be available as an online course. It will be available as an online course slightly later than we'd intended, because it's taking us longer to create the website than we thought, but that should be available from February. And that will be a comprehensive pick up and play online course for instructors who want to be able to teach children self-protection from 4 years old up to 18.
Nice. Well, very nice. So for those that want to see this podcast again, or if you guys want to share it or something, you just have to go on my YouTube channel, Adrenaline Combatives. In the live section, you will find it. So watch it, share it widely, spread the love, and we'll see you next time, guys.
Thanks, Julien.
Thank you.